Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, get ready to mark your scorecard on the state of our air, water, and climate. We talk with Maryland Senate leaders Brian Frosh and Joan Carter Conway about the 2003 legislative session. Kids are us. First, Debbie Mintz Brodsky chats about the lives of 5 immigrant high schoolers trying to cope in their new home in Annandale, Virginia. They're the subject of Brodsky's documentary, Teens in Between. Then activist and author Betsy Taylor shares some findings and tips from her new book, What Kids Really Want That Money Can't Buy. And we've got poets on youth. Jessica Simon pulls open the curtains on teens in suburbia, while Baltimore's native son remembers playing as a kid. And Maritza Rivera reflects and laments in My Daughter's Ashes. Plus, singer-songwriter Lianna. She sings, It's a Beautiful Life. Welcome to the forum at the Coffee House. Maryland Governor Bob Ehrlich, in his short time in office, has shown a willingness to go to the mat on issues that matter to him, get pinned, dust himself off and announce its best 2 out of the 3. Ehrlich's tenacity isn't limited to slots in the budget. Recall his nomination of Lynn Buhl as Secretary of the Environment. Despite ample warning, Ehrlich forced her nomination to a vote, and he was pinned by majority Democrats in the Senate led by Brian Frosh of Montgomery County. Frosh chairs the Judicial Proceedings Committee. He previously headed the Senate's Environment Subcommittee. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Thanks, Mark.
You likened the nomination of Lynn Buhl to someone invited to be a babysitter for the Addams family. Can you recount what you said?
Well, you know, Lynn Buhl worked for the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. The director of that department was known as the Darth Vader of the environment in Michigan, and the department had a horrendous record. At one time, they had more suits pending against EPA than they did against polluters in Michigan. I asked Lynn Buhl in the hearing on her confirmation if the department had done anything during her 3-year tenure that she disagreed with, and she said no. I asked her again, you know, just to be sure, and she couldn't think of anything. And so I said it was as if you were interviewing a babysitter, and her previous employer were the Addams family, and you said...
We're talking about, for those who aren't as old as us, this is a TV comedy about a monster family.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And so I said it was as if she worked for the Addams family, the babysitter worked for the Addams family, and you said, did you notice anything strange going on when you worked there? And she said, no. And it really, I mean, I don't think it was off the charts in terms of a metaphor.
That wasn't the only thing she's done in her past life, though. She also was an environmental attorney for Chrysler.
Yes, she spent 11 years working for Chrysler, fighting environmental regulation. She moved from there to this terrible department, and she worked there for 3 years in kind of a mid-level position. And the administration's argument for her was they were caught in kind of a box, because on the one hand, they were telling us, this is a lady who's got great environmental credentials, she was making policy, she was doing great things in Michigan, and on the other hand, well, you know, she didn't have anything to do with the bad things that department did, and you can't blame her for those. In fact, I think she was kind of a mid-level bureaucrat. It was very odd that they reached halfway across the country to pluck her out of
and
this
then
department.
Fought very hard for her. In fact, the communications director for the governor made a comment that environmental groups that opposed her nomination would not have a seat at the table thereafter.
Yes, they made all kinds of threats and I thought rash statements.
The final vote was 26-21 in the Senate against her confirmation. A few Democrats voted with the governor, but most stayed with you and the majority. You were prepared, though, at a certain point to approve her on an interim basis, were you not?
Well, the president of the Senate, Mike Miller, who was one of the opponents, was anxious not to have a train wreck on this issue. It was relatively early in the in the session, and it was very, very early in the Ehrlich administration, and there were a lot of other things, a lot of other business that we had to get done, and I think Mike didn't want to see the session start to unravel because of that. He told me to go see Ehrlich and make a deal. And I offered what I thought was a compromise right down the middle between confirming her and rejecting her, and that was that we do nothing. That this is after the Executive Nominations Committee had recommended against confirmation, but I proposed that we do nothing, which would allow her, send her nomination back to committee, allow her to serve as the acting secretary, and essentially have her on probation for 9 months. The governor could resubmit her nomination the following January, and we'd see.
And what did the governor say?
No. It took him...
Did you speak directly to him?
Yes. He didn't tell me no when he was supposed to tell me no. He waited until the evening before the vote. But
why do you think he pushed it, given that the votes weren't there?
I think the main reason they pushed it was because they thought they could roll us. They thought the legislators in Annapolis are used to doing what the governor wants. And I think he felt that he could get his way. And they were promising and threatening senators, and I think they just felt that people would cave in.
But she still is the acting environmental secretary, isn't she?
This is the ultimate irony here. It's now 2 months later. She's still serving as the acting secretary of environment. It's a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the process. The governor's got to yank her out of there. He's got to do it soon.
Now, he's had more success with another environmental appointment. Former Senator Martin Madden was appointed to Chesapeake Critical something or other commission.
The Chesapeake Bay Critical Areas Commission.
Yeah.
He's been nominated to be the chairman of the commission. It's a full-time job. This is a much smarter appointment. Everybody in the Senate knows Marty Madden. Most of us served with him. He's a reasonable guy. He had a pretty good record on environmental issues. I don't agree with him as much as I agreed with his predecessor, Judge North, but he's got credibility, and I'm confident he'll be confirmed.
Now, what about C. Ronald Franks, who was appointed the director of the Department of Natural Resources? And, by the way, what is the difference between the Department of Natural Resources and the Environmental Department?
Well, the Department of Natural Resources is essentially the steward of Maryland's parks and forests and Chesapeake Bay. They have policemen who are out on the bay and in the forests, though not as many as they ought to have. And they determine fishing policy and logging policy and stuff like that. The Department of Environment is the agency that is the enforcement cop. If somebody wants to pollute the water, pollute the air, they say you can have a permit, but you can only do so much nitrogen oxide and so much carbon monoxide, and they are supposed to enforce those permits.
Let's look at some of the specific legislation that was before the General Assembly this year. Now, I know that your jurisdiction has changed somewhat now that you're on Judiciary, but you had led the Senate Environment Subcommittee for years before that, and everybody I spoke to said that you're the person to talk to. So, first of all, the question of clean water in the state. There were stricter penalties passed this year, weren't there, for violations of clean water standards and wetlands standards?
Yes, there were. It's a follow-up to a bill that Governor Glendening had introduced or sponsored last year. It scaled it back, but it does increase some of the penalties that were really abysmally low in Maryland.
These had been in place for some 30 years.
Yes. There's an interesting footnote to the Buhl nomination here, too, if I may, Mark.
Please.
Lynn Buhl came before the Executive Nominations Committee and announced her support for this bill. And the committee recommended against her nomination. The next morning, the department pulled its support for the bill. It was sponsored by Democratic Senator Paul Pinsky from Prince George's County, and it was obviously in retaliation for the rejection of her nomination by the committee. It was a very strange and I thought stumbling performance by the administration.
There was a bill on clean energy to improve the standards for various products that are sold in the state. Tell us about that.
This is, I think, a very forward-looking piece of legislation. It will improve energy efficiency in a number of consumer products that are sold in the state. And it will save a ton of energy, a ton of pollution. I don't mean literally a ton, I mean actually many tons of pollution. It'll save many megawatts of energy once it's fully implemented. There are all kinds of different products that will set standards for. There are a number of other states that are doing the same thing, and actually, if it's implemented nationwide, it'll have a great impact on our environment and on our import of oil.
One thing that didn't pass this time around was the Clean Energy Portfolio, House Bill 370, which would have required that 7.5% of the energy that power companies used in the state would come from renewable resources. What do you think the prospects are for that next year?
Well, there are many states that have adopted these green portfolios, and I of course think Maryland ought to be one of them. It's hard to be optimistic. It's now died 3 or 4 years in a row. I don't know that the Ehrlich administration is particularly friendly to it. I don't know what would happen if we passed it and it landed on his desk, but it's really something we got to move to, and so I'm hopeful, if not optimistic.
Finally, let's talk about the impact that the budget impasse might have on either the legislation that has been passed by the General Assembly and efforts to improve the environment.
The budget is going to be a big problem for the environmental agencies, both for the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Environment. They've been cut back dramatically. MDE, the Department of Environment, has been hanging by a thread in terms of its enforcement ability for the past few years. It's been cut back dramatically under the Ehrlich administration's budget. If we don't find new sources of revenues or the economy doesn't surprise everyone and rebound sharply, the Department of Environment, DNR, are going to suffer additional cuts, and I think it's going to be devastating to their missions.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time we have. I want to thank Senator Brian Frosh for joining us in the Coffee House. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum.
In a neighborhood, a suburb, there's space between houses, there's neat blue shutters and cut green grass, there's flower beds, blue skies, trees and swings, no guns, no violence, no projects, no gangs. So safe you say they say, but we know and we see better. There's a beautiful young girl in a pink sweater with pink cheeks in a pink bathroom with a pink razor, and she is cutting herself. She is cutting herself because she believes her mirror tells her self-image the truth. What is wrong here? What is wrong here? Then there's a boy with black clothes and black hair spiked black with black eyes, and he is on a railing threatening to jump because his friends did not know how to help him. What is wrong with this? What is wrong with this? Then there's another girl with brown hair and high heels and a pretty face and a pretty body, and she is swallowing pills 10 by 10, 10 too many, because she cannot find joy in life. What is wrong here and what is the problem? Maybe there's not enough caring, too much money for caring, too much college for control. There's never time, never a moment to realize, rationalize. We need poetry. Just take a pen and make the paper listen, because maybe it will care. The parents are shocked. They say, "My child, you don't know what you're talking about," because parents know their children. Don't they? Shouldn't they? Do they? They look at their children and they can't understand why they are so sad, so they send them to professionals who can help them, fix them, and get them on the right track, the track to happiness, success, and peace of mind. And the professionals say, "How do you feel? Tell me about it." And for $75 an hour, they listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and say nothing. But what is really wrong here? Well, Our peers know, but what can they do? They don't tell and don't realize and mock and dismiss and forget and cry and don't know true happiness. Feeling sympathy for the surroundings, they have to pretend nothing's amiss and just gossip about some chemistry or about who they want to kiss. Kissing. Love could be the answer. More of it that would be. But who can pick out those who don't know that love makes joy free? And what's to gain by knowing only the motivation for action, an easy spoken faction, yet a plead for satisfaction? Let's ask someone who knows, someone who isn't afraid to express shameful desperation. He says, instead of razors or pills or finger and throat reflexes, sit, he says calmly. Sit in a dark room with music that moves you and linger in the midst of your sadness, confusion, and desperation and realize you will not be obliterated for it and just try to know yourself. And for the rest who just don't know how to help, for once try to see beyond lips and hair, realize despair, and if what you see scares you, be strong enough to care. Don't conclude life's unfair, see the beauty that you can share. Know that life is not a pedestal privilege, it's for you, and it's there.
Welcome to Rewind at the Coffee House. The teen years are tough enough if you're native-born and affluent. Now put yourself in the shoes of Somali or Vietnamese or Egyptian teens who, thanks to fate, find themselves at Annandale High School in Virginia. I don't know these kids, but I might know their older brother or sister. I teach writing at Northern Virginia Community College, one of the most ethnically diverse institutions of higher education in the country. So I want to thank Debbie Mintz Brodsky, a producer at MHz Networks in Falls Church, for bringing the story of these often forgotten immigrant teens to life in her remarkable documentary, Teens in Between. Before we chat with Debbie, let's get introduced to one of her subjects, a 16-year-old Honduran named Jorge.
In my country, I play baseball and soccer too. And here I can't. I don't have time to play, you know. I work 3:30 to 10 o'clock at night. Nobody can give me a ride because my mother is in her work. I just have permit, you know. If the police look at me, I have a problem, and my mother too. I try to drive very well for the policemen don't catch me. I need my license. Excuse me, would you tell me how can I be registered, please? Yeah, I got the permit, but I wanna have a license. Okay. Do you speak Spanish? Okay. I'm 16 years old, but I went to DMV the last week, and they told me if I wanna pay for those classes, I can do so. I want to pay for that. 267. Okay.
Jorge is one of the 5 central characters in Teens in Between by filmmaker Debbie Mintz Brodsky. Welcome, Debbie, to the Coffee House.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us first what led you to make this film?
Gosh, that's a question that I get asked a lot, actually. I work for MHz Networks, which is one of the few independent public broadcasting stations here in the Washington area. And we focus, our goal is for the globally minded viewer, and so we do a lot of international newscasts, films, music, things like that. And my job has always been to produce some of the local angle of the multicultural community that's here in Washington, D.C. And so many of my feature stories featured a lot of recent immigrants, but usually it was about adults. And at some point along the way, I started to wonder, what must it be like for teenagers or children of these adults who come here, often not by choice, and they come to this country and then they're sort of thrown into high school. They have to go to public school. And so in this time when they're just trying to still figure out who they are, you know, they're in this whole new environment, just so many challenges that they had to face. So I started doing some research, found Annandale High School to be one of the most diverse with so many different cultures, not only in Fairfax County but in the country. I think they represent 86 different countries of students at the school. And so started doing some research and talking with the teachers and the students and found that there really were a multitude of issues and sort of went from there.
Wow. Now, this movie has 5 central characters. How did you happen to, out of all the students at Annandale High School, pick these 5?
It was really hard. When I went to do my research, I screened about 50 different students, sat with them, talked with them, just got to know them a little bit better, what their problems were and things like that, and sort of narrowed down not only the kids that had the more interesting, different kinds of struggles, but also that were willing to talk and willing to, share their lives on camera. And so over the summer, got to know their families, and finally got to that point where I said, would you let me follow you around for a year with a camera? And so found about 8 actually willing students.
So you started with 8?
I started with 8, and what I found, there was so much. I had about 140 hours of footage, and I had to whittle that down into an hour and a half. And so with an editor, figured out that it was just going to be too hard to follow 8 different stories. So we had to cut it down to 5, which was hard.
And you were able to, one of the really interesting things about this film is that you were able to get into the families a little bit. I mean, as a teacher, I see students in my classroom and I can have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the classroom, but I can't really imagine what's happening at home. But with your film, one of the amazing things about your film is that you were able to get inside the families of these 5 students. And I think we have a clip of Jorge that we'll look at now.
My mom, she didn't go to work. She has a headache, and we went to get medicine for the high blood pressure. You speak Spanish? Okay. Venía por la... O sea, se le acabó la medicina a mi mamá.
Lo que pasa es que usted no tiene que estar ningún día sin medicina, porque la presión se le va a subir.
Hoy viene porque él tiene libre, no trabaja hoy miércoles.
Ese es el problema. Tenemos libre en el trabajo. Tengo libre.
Yo no.
Ella no.
Yo no tengo libre hasta el sábado.
I paid for it. She had her money, but paid for it because I'm a man, maybe. I have to care of them because they are my only family.
He's an amazing character. When he said, "I'll pay for it," that really affects you as a viewer. Did you find what did you observe about the cultural differences among the 5 students? Is Jorge's situation typical of the young people that you filmed?
As far as yes and no, I would say. I think one of the differences with Jorge compared to the other 4 students is that he was living in a single-parent home with a mother who had only lived here for a little while, and so didn't have the English capacity to really get a well-paying job. So he was not only going to school and doing all those things, but he was helping to support the family and pay the bills at 16. Which is a lot to ask of anyone, you know, and while he's still trying to learn English as well. The other students all had some economic hardships, I would say, too. But for instance, one of the other characters, Nat, he wanted to work, he wanted to help his parents, but his mom was so determined. The reason they came here,
the Vietnamese,
thank you, the Vietnamese boy, his parents really wanted him to have a better education, and that's why he was here, and that was his job, was to do well and get good grades. And so as much as he wanted to work and support the family, that wasn't an option for him.
I was curious about what you thought you were going to find when you started this film, and then once you spent all these months with these young people, what kinds of things you found out in contrast maybe to what you thought you were going to get?
Yeah, you know, I didn't necessarily go in with so many preconceived notions about what was going to happen. I had some ideas about what I thought would be, but for instance with Jorge, his big storyline, one of the storylines in this is about him not having a license and driving without a license, which I think we'll see, we've seen, and that was something I didn't know until the first week that I started filming him, so that was something I had no idea that was going to be a big part of it. Another student that actually isn't in the film, he was from India and he was Sikh, and so he wore a turban, and the year that I filmed him was supposed to be the first year he was in all mainstream classes, so no ESL students. And I thought he was going to have so much trouble with that, and also with wearing a turban. People were going to make fun of him, tease him, and he would have all these traumas. And what I found was that he did great academically and was fine. No one bothered him with the turban, and he was very strong in his culture, was okay with not cutting his hair, not dating. Nothing really bothered him, so to speak. So
right.
That surprised me, I guess.
Well, there's so many things we could ask. One thing I was really struck with in this film as a teacher myself was the impression you get from Annandale High School that this is a high school that really cares about these students and really gives them a lot, from the counselor to one of the other teachers who actually sort of semi-adopted one of the characters in your play. I think we have a clip from the school showing some of the academic issues that Jorge in particular faced. So we'll take a look at that now.
Okay, make sure your name, your class period is on a paper. The thing. Casey, you ready? First word, to use something the wrong way. Number 2, a group designed for children and teenagers whose parents are alcoholics. And number 5, an act against the law. An act against the law. Okay, you need to pass your papers out. Okay, pass your papers out. Okay, I need all papers now.
It's such a classic scene when Jorge's not really ready to do what he needs to do there in class. What was your sense of the school and how the school served these students?
You know, it was really interesting, not only during while I was filming, but then when I actually showed it to the faculty. I had a special screening for the Annandale High School faculty. And even the teachers, even from the ESL teachers who thought that they were doing everything that they could, they found, by watching the film, they realized, like what you said, that you can't go home with them. They saw this whole other side that they sometimes would forget about when they were teaching, and so it reminded them of that. One of the other things that came out of this film was, with that class in particular actually, was a PE class. PE, or physical education gym, whatever you want to call it. For the ESL kids, even the very, very beginning ESL kids, even though all of their classes are ESL, they have to take gym. That's a requirement in Fairfax County. And so you have these students who don't speak any English, who have very little, you know,
who are semi-veiled in some cases.
Yeah. There's a scene in the film with the girl Terea, who's Muslim, you know, has never been to school with boys before or anything like that. And here's this teacher coming and shaking her hand. And
you see this delightful change in her over the course of the film, which is really it's very compelling. What's happened to these students since your film? Your film came out a couple of years ago, and
the film came out actually just this past November. It first aired, and since that time, a few of them have graduated high school. Some are finishing high school, and doing really well. You know, they're all sort of growing, and their stories are still evolving. Actually, you know.
The young man we featured in particular, what's happened to Jorge?
He's unfortunately still really struggling. He's actually not in high school at the time. Hopefully he will go back to high school, but he's having a tough time. So.
Well, I think this one thing I found from watching your movie, these characters keep occurring to me. You've done a wonderful job of making these bringing these young people to the viewer, and I think it's a remarkable film. And thank you for coming to share it with us. Thanks to MHz Networks' Debbie Brodsky for joining us here in the Coffee House. Teens in Between will air on MHz again on Wednesday, June 4th at 9 p.m. If you're a teacher or a civic activist and want more information about arranging a showing of Teens in Between, visit mhznetworks.org. Online, I'm Denny May, and this has been Rewind.
My mother, she was really angry with me because I got an F
in algebra. She told me you have to cut hours in your work.
Yo quisiera tener un mejor trabajo para ganar suficiente y que él no trabajara. Porque él necesita estudiar más que todo y así no le queda mucho tiempo para hacer sus tareas.
Well, my mother works in McDonald's, and she works a lot, but she gets the minimum. But she's going to school. Hopefully she will get a better job.
I remember playing freeze tag till it was well after dark, outlining a hopscotch game on your block with a piece of school chalk. 1, 2, 3, red light, or knick knock on a neighbor's door, then scat. Or if you feel like, how about some Jacks or Miss Mary Mack? The fastest running a bunch always held clout. And remember, stickball and dodgeball, it was OUT out. Up a little higher, see who could touch the sky. Down a little lower, believing you can fly. Bubble gum in a dish. How many bubble gums do you wish? Remember wishing upon a star and playing That's My Car. Ripping and running up and down the street, mama yelling, don't go too far. I remember racing big wheels down the block like the Indy 500, and I pretended I was whatever it was, I wondered. I remember getting chased by bees, trying to climb the biggest tree, and every time we got candy, we called it our energy. I remember roller skates and hostess cakes and even homemade pie. And to keep a secret was cross my heart and hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. And I know y'all remember frozen cups and jumping on the bed. And no matter what it was, candy or Kool-Aid, the favorite color was red. Now and later, lemon heads, Boston baked beans, and garbage pail kids. I remember how we used to climb all over my dad like a set of monkey bars. And when we performed in front of the family, they made us feel like superstars. And a visit to grandma's meant ginger snaps and fig Newton bars. We thought she was the greatest person in the whole wide world. I remember getting in trouble for running in a house for a planned church. Get sent outside and somebody always scraped their near elbow, forever getting hurt. Sometimes I didn't know which was worse, getting pinched for going to sleep in church outside of my Sunday clothes playing in the dirt. And I remember on Thursday nights, my mom, she would let us stay past 8 to watch the Cosby Show. And the only time we watched the news was to pray school was closed for snow. And when the street lights came on, time to go in. But if it was a nice summer evening, my mom, she'd let us stay on the porch every now and then. I remember every other day getting into a fight with a friend, but the very next day we done worked it out and became best friends again. I remember the afternoon games being interrupted by the music of the ice cream truck, and you'd run as fast as you could back to the house to beg your mom for $1. Shucks. I remember getting up real early to watch Saturday morning cartoons and eating cereal out of a huge bowl with that big wooden spoon. You know, love kept us together, but not having money didn't do too much damage. You know, you never went hungry as long as you had a syrup sandwich. And I remember when Kool-Aid was like a staple part of the meal, and being poor was no joke, but it didn't seem like a big deal. At least not to us, the kids, because we all lived about the same, and our parents kept us happy. We never really knew of the pain. Don't ask me how they did it. I just praise his holy name. But now that I'm all grown up, it seems like all the good times just faded away. Sometimes I wish I could just go back to when all there was play. Back in the days when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore, but some days I sit and wish I was a kid again.
Hi, and welcome to a second look at the Coffee House. Brand name shoes sell for twice as much as generic brands, but we buy Nike and Adidas for our kids anyway. Same deal with low-cut designer jeans. And how many 13-year-olds are walking around with cell phones? Not to mention video games. Don't even get me started on Xbox and PlayStation. Stuff, and more stuff. Our kids are loaded with stuff. How nice it'd be if our kids would settle for a big hug instead. How simpler life would be. Well, in her new book, What Kids Really Want That Money Can't Buy, Betsy Taylor proposes that American children might actually prefer a hug over another video game. She's compiled research and claims that kids might not want all the stuff we think they want. Welcome, Betsy, to the coffee house. I'm tempted here to call this a preposterous idea. In fact, I will call it a preposterous idea. So where does it come from?
Well, you know, we know kids want things and they nag us for things, and we know they're pushing for all this stuff all the time. But at my organization, it's a nonprofit group called the Center for a New American Dream. We ran a contest, and we asked kids all over the country, well, what do you want that money can't buy? We know you want the stuff that money can buy. And we wanted to really give them a chance to answer that question. And so we went out with a contest through teen magazines, family magazines, and we had almost 2,000 kids ages 5 to 17 respond. And it was fabulous. You know, they want, the main thing they want is time. They just want time to be kids.
They are too busy.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable how many kids drew clocks. Pictures of clocks, you know. But the big thing that came back from the contest, and which is in the book, is that they really want time with mom and dad, and they really want time with friends, and they feel, yeah, they want the stuff, but if you give them the choice, they'd rather take the hug.
They'd really take that.
They really would.
Well, all right. I actually believe you, but let me play devil's advocate just a little bit and say, of course, bedrooms and playrooms all over America are filled with PlayStation and Xboxes and DVDs and so forth. So why is that? Is that, can we blame somebody?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had, you know, obviously we live in a commercial world, and we've had Snap, Crackle, and Pop when we were kids, but it is different now. And kids today are getting so much marketing, not just through commercial television, which is the big one, but through the internet, pop-up ads. Every kid's movie has products embedded in it with fast food tie-ins. In schools, there's advertising in local Montgomery County schools. And so when you are bombarded from day to till night with messages saying you are what you buy, well, it's really hard to resist that.
And I read at some point in your book that you say it's worse than ever, that, and it's somewhat sinister, that if someone is quoted, you quote someone saying, if you tell kids to buy something, maybe they'll resist, but if you tell them that they are dorks if they don't buy it, then it's hard for them to resist.
It's unbelievable. You know, at my group at the center, we actually study the advertising industry and how they're propelling this hyper-consumerism among kids. And they're now targeting kids 6 months old. There have been studies done that show 6 months old kids are actually identifying corporate brands, and they are trying to get brand loyalty by 2. Because they know if they can get you to identify a brand and stay with it, that's worth about $100,000 over the lifetime of the consumer. So the stakes are very high. And in that kind of context, parents, you know, parents feel this, parents and kids together, and parents have a big responsibility to try to help their kids navigate that kind of commercial world.
So you hold this contest, and there's this ray of hope, a ray of revelation from the kids that maybe all this stuff isn't as much as it's cracked up to be.
You know, it's not that, you know, we shouldn't consume. It's about balance, and we are in a society which tells us that working and spending is what really matters. But when you go to the kids themselves, and frankly, I think if we went to adults and you said, well, what really matters? I mean, what do you want that money can't buy? It's all the stuff that we know matters, you know. It's relationships, it's human bonds, it's grandmothers. It's the fact that people really are hungry to be outside in nature. All that stuff came pouring out from the kids. I mean, I came away writing this book feeling really hopeful, like that these kids they're gonna be fine. They're connected to what matters.
And I'm impressed also that you just didn't base it on this contest as some of us might do, say we found something a little. You followed it up and did some real scientific polling, and you've got research that talked a little more specifically about
what kids want. Yeah. There is some polling data that I think we were going to look at possibly that shows that kids, when given the choice, of course they would like to go to the mall, but when given the choice, they'd actually rather spend more fun time with mom and dad. 90% said
90% said that.
Yeah.
Now that is, to me, it's just amazing.
We also did a bunch of focus groups, and I observed them. And yes, kids push and nag. And in fact, we did one poll that showed kids on average will nag 9 times to get something that you say no to. But when you go deeper,
they give up, or they succeed after 9 times.
After 9 times, a lot of them succeed. Parents, the parents give in, which is a problem.
Right.
But the polling that we did nationwide showed that kids really want the things that money can't buy. Yes, they want the other stuff, but it's for parents. I think often we're so busy, we just think, oh, let's just buy them that because that'll make them happy. But actually, if you go out and throw a ball, if you go out and watch the stars, if you take the time to maybe bake bread together or go fishing, they're going to be a lot happier. They're going to remember that more than going to the mall.
When we were growing up, I mean, all of those things happened, and they sort of happened without any real tribulation on the part of our parents. I mean, I grew up in rural America, which was a little extreme even then, but still, people had simpler, slower lives. True.
Yeah, I mean, life is so much different today than it was when we were kids, let alone when our parents were kids. And in that context, it's extremely important as parents to remember what was magical about your childhood, and is your son getting it? Is your daughter getting it? And what can we do to create the space for them to have that?
Kids, even if they're not at the PlayStation or obsessed with computer games, even if they're serious kids, there's homework, there are athletics, there are music lessons, there are all these other things, though. How do you get around that?
Well, it's huge. I mean, kids today have 40% less leisure time than they did in 1980. School day is longer, there's more homework, the school year is longer, there's more scheduled activities, and I actually feel it's part of this whole got to stay ahead of the pack mentality,
absolutely,
which is deep into our culture right now.
Right, because at 6 months old, we're thinking Harvard. I mean, the marketeers are thinking,
what do you have to do to get them into Ivy?
That's right.
And in that context, it's just so important to pull back and remember that sometimes less is more. That sometimes not doing all those activities or taking the more advanced track actually serves your child in the long run better. Because the kids themselves in this book and in the contest, I was so amazed at the number who wrote in so hungry for time. So hungry for time.
So they're burned out on everything that we've
given them. And as parents, we want to give them these opportunities. There's so many choices, but there's too many choices. There's too many possibilities. And so I think, we all know this. This is not, but the kids themselves are saying, hey, slow down. The life doesn't feel right. Yeah. So part of what we have to do, I think, actually, is push back on the system a little bit. But in our own homes and lives, I think we need to protect them from advertising. We need to teach them about how to understand advertising. We need to turn off commercial TV more.
Okay, when you say teach them, protect them from advertising, well, turn off the TV is one idea, obviously.
Yeah, that's the big one. Don't put a TV in your child's bedroom. A quarter of Americans' children have a TV in their bedroom. That's a mistake.
I'm completely ashamed to say that my son
Get it out of there, Howard.
Okay. So I'm going to go home and pack that sucker up. But,
well, you'll have a fight on your hands because once you've opened the door. But
what else?
Part of it is being conscious of where this message, buy more is coming from. But the second thing is to sit down with your kids and actually talk about advertising. So really, for a month, not more than that because it can get old fast. Look at billboards, look at TV commercials, listen to radio ads, and have your child take it apart, turn it into a game. So when an ad comes on for potato chips, and they've got these kids who are so cool looking and doing their stuff with the skateboards, and you can say, well, do you really think that eating that chip is going to make you skateboard like that? And it's dumb. And you get what it does is it helps the child get a distance from advertising. So restrict their exposure, teach them about how it works so they have some distance from it. But when you say no to stuff, which we have to do, say yes to the stuff they really want. Which, go for a camping trip, go for a walk.
Go fishing, throw the ball.
And if you have to work 2 jobs because you're a low-income parent, there are little things you can do. Find one time during the day which is only for your child. No, you don't turn the cell phone on. You don't do anything except focus on your child. They're hungry for it.
Yeah. Yeah, 5 minutes can mean a lot, actually. Or
it can.
30 minutes means a whole lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And to look at the fact that we're just, we're really creating a generation of hyper-consumers, which is going to be real hard on our kids in the long haul. A quarter of college kids have tremendous financial management problems. Right. But there's also environmental ramifications of creating a whole new generation of super consumers.
Well, I am so happy that you've written this book.
And you're going to get rid of that TV.
And I may or may not get rid of that TV, but I will try. Thank you. Thanks to Betsy Taylor for giving us her message that enough is enough. Actually, as she says, this message comes not from her, but from our kids. But she took the time to listen to them and has put it all together in a terrific new book, What Kids Really Want That Money Cannot Buy. A number of reviewers call it a must-read, and I agree. I'm Howard Cohn, and this has been A Second Look.
She insisted on being cremated, had her own strange way of viewing life and death, had a passion for trees, butterflies, snakes, spirits, old movies, night music. She loved to dress up and dance, wore lots of black and shades of purple, never cared much for red, said her brother was her best partner. She lived like a gypsy, wanted her own uncharted island, wandered off into the rainforest, followed forgotten trails in El Yunque. She learned to camp under mountain stars, slept to the rush of the Wallingford stream, drove for miles in the rain to reach Maine, but never made it to Nova Scotia. Told her once when she was young it wouldn't last forever, asked her what she was trying to prove. Though she tried to explain, never quite understood her poetry or who she really was. Guess I wasn't listening, didn't like the sound of the things she said. She believed in things I never could, took the risks I never would, found a way to soar with her own wings. She insisted on being cremated and always had a way of getting exactly what she wanted.
You've got a way of forgiving. It's like I don't understand. You've got a way of believing. You make me believe in who I am. I wanna know where you are when you're halfway awake and dreaming, lying there in your arms. Love is all I'm feeling. Yeah. Well, you've seen my best and my worst, but through it all you've kept your smile. What I've come to understand, sometimes life takes a while. I wanna know where you are when you're halfway awake and dreaming, lying there in your arms. Love is all I'm feeling. Yeah. lessons we've learned lead our way, we'll be okay. 'Cause we could rally up the strength and love till nothing that we fear is in our way. I wanna know where you are when you're halfway awake and dreaming, lying there in your arms. Love is all I'm feeling. You've got a way of forgiving. You've got a way of believing.
Welcome to the musical tradition segment of the Coffee House.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, I'm excited.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you were going to pay money to see an artist perform, who would you pay to see?
Sheryl Crow.
That's quick. That was
Yeah,
quick.
Sheryl Crow. I've been listening to her Come On record, and I just think she's an artist that has staying power, and she's so versatile. I just think it's great.
Now, you came to playing the guitar and singing out a little bit later in life.
I did. I guess it was the beginning of my first year of grad school.
And it gave you stress relief?
Yeah, I was in law school, and
Right.
it was a challenge, and this was a great outlet. So I enjoyed being able to do it.
And sort of it became the road taken instead of the road not taken, didn't it?
Correct, yeah, with a couple of detours along the way,
Yeah.
but yeah, it did.
And now you moved here recently.
Did.
And you're now working, teaching kids music.
I am, yeah. I was really blessed. I met Rachel Cross after I'd been here like a week, and she's a local singer-songwriter, and she put me in touch with Fillmore Arts Center, and so now I get to teach little pre-K to fifth graders music, and it's a joy. I enjoy it.
Give them a lot of air guitar.
I do. We rock out to this land is your land.
And you can sort of subvert them a little bit.
Exactly.
They don't even know it.
No, they think I'm a little fruity, but it's all good.
Yeah. What was the name of the song that you opened with?
Where You Are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that going to be come out on a recording?
It is. It's going to be on the new record. It's not on my first record, which is Walk in My Shoes, but a new record that's going to be out this year called Beautiful Life.
All right. You probably have one more to take us home with?
I do.
What would that one be?
It's called Beautiful Life.
Do you always work solo, or do you tend to every now and then trio it up? And
I primarily work as a solo acoustic artist, but I would be more than happy to put a band together. And on the first record, I actually toured with the band.
This is
in
going
the
out
Southeast.
all around the Washington, Baltimore area, so they'll write into the station.
That's awesome.
Right. Okay, well, take us home.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you.
I met you there, you were up on the stage, singing your heart out to us. And at the end of the show, you said, good luck, I've gotta go. You climbed on your magic bus. Then I drove home, I wondered what your life must be like. Does your vision get clouded under all of those lights? Or do you see like Van Gogh on a starry, starry night? Is it a beautiful life? Does it seem like too much when the pressure builds up and the record executives, they're wanting your blood? Do you ever feel sometimes it is never enough? Or is it all worth it to do what you love? 'Cause I wonder sometimes what your life must be like. Does your vision get clouded under all of those lights? Or do you see like Van Gogh on a starry, starry night? Is it a beautiful life? Beautiful life. 'Cause we're all buying the tickets, we're buying the sound, the songs that purchasing might be one thing we have found in this beautiful life. Now I'm selling tickets, selling the sound. Some people think that it won't be long now, but I got my moments, they're full of doubts. I'm still trying to figure it out, but still I wonder sometimes what my life would be like. My vision gets clouded under just these small lights, and I've never seen like Van Gogh on a starry night. But it's a beautiful life, and I met you there up on the stage, singing your heart out to us.
That's it for this time. See you next month in the Coffee House.